welcome back. Today we are talking wedding cakes. Everything you need to know from when you get an inquiry to delivering the cake to the venue and everything in between. Loads of you asked me for this tutorial. I'm not actually going to be making anything, I'm just going to be talking a lot, but I hope you find it informative. I'm still learning. I've been doing wedding cakes for about 5 years now. And I would consider myself still new in the industry. Every time I do a cake, I learn something new. So I'm going to share with you my knowledge and what works for me. There's no one way of doing things, so you may have heard different things from other people, but again, I've learned with experience, so thought I would share what I know. I'm going to start with you getting your inquiry. So a customer emails you, "Hi, I'm getting married," and they say a date, and then they ask what your process is of a wedding cake or how they go about it. Firstly, remember that they're a customer and you want to show that you're nice, keen, and like perfect for the job, basically. You're trying to win them over. Little do you know, they may be talking to loads of other cake makers, so you want to make a good impression. I always congratulate my clients. So if someone emails me saying, "Hi, we're getting married next year," I go, "Congratulations on your engagement." Already it sets the tone. Now secondly, it depends what the inquiry says. Some people ask, "Hi, I'm getting married, do you do tastings?" Or some people may do a really detailed description. So you obviously have to read what they're after. So a lot of clients ask me about tastings. I did actually do a YouTube tutorial recently of how I make my wedding tasters. I think this is the best way to give them to your client for them to try. Now, I don't have a shop and I make every cake specifically for the client. So I used to do free tastings. I was quickly persuaded not to because a few people tasted and then I never heard anything, so they got free cake. And you may have heard this phrase before, but time is money. So I've started to charge for tastings. I do £50 for the client to just collect the samples, or £100 for a sit-down consultation. I actually hold mine at the wedding gallery where I have a stand myself, and it's a beautiful space, and I offer them drinks, tea, coffee, etc. It's £100 to sit with them for about an hour and talk through the cake as well as tasting the cakes. Now again, some people price this differently. Mine may seem a little more expensive. However, the tasting comes off the price of the cake. So essentially, the tasting is free if the client goes ahead with the wedding cake. I think it's the fairest way because if for some reason the client doesn't go ahead, you don't lose out. So it's during the tasting I usually explain how I work and how the prices work as well. Now, again, that depends on their client's original email, if they want everything in an email first. The main key is not to hide any details. You don't want them to get really enthusiastic about the cake and then pretty much secure the order and go, "Oh, by the way, there's another £100 delivery on top." So you want to be honest and upfront about everything there and then, whether that's by email or at the tasting itself. I offer up to 4 different flavours of my tasting. If people want extra, then I charge accordingly, but usually 4 is a good number because my average size cake is usually 3 or 4 tiers, similar to this one right here. So if they're trying 4 flavours and they have 3 tiers, they usually choose between 2 or 3. Let's use this cake for example, because I have it right here. This feeds 70 people. I'll get onto portion sizes. The top tier only feeds 10. So it doesn't make much sense to flavour the top tier with 1 flavour because only 10 portions will have that flavour. So it's good to balance out the flavours. So for a cake this size, I would usually recommend either 1 or 2 flavours. So during the consultation and tasting, I actually bring a form. Now this is for my own purpose, and it's got the client's name, the date, the style of the cake they want, the sizes, the decoration, delivery, everything on this piece of paper because you don't want to miss any details. I've learnt from mistakes saying, "Oh, I'll remember that by the time the cake comes around." Trust me, you don't. So I find if you write everything down there and then in the meeting, and when it comes to making the cake, I have this in front of me, again, to make sure that I don't miss anything. So pricing and portions. For me, the two come hand in hand because I price my cakes depending on the portion size. Just as an example, like I said, this feeds 70. and so I price it based on 70 portions. The same design feeding 120 will be the same price per portion, but obviously for more portions, so it's going to be more expensive. Pricing is one of the most difficult things that I had to learn during my cake journey, let's say. There's no rule. You can go to a lower bracket or a higher bracket, depending on what you're offering, the kind of cakes you do, and what your competitors are charging, really. I quickly figured out the portion guide pricing, the most effective, and it also just lets the client know immediately roughly how much they're going to be spending on the cake. So for example, if you say £6 a portion, 120 people, they know that it's roughly 720. God, my maths. So I will tell you what my prices are. This is by no means telling you how you should price your cakes. Like I said, each to their own. Every cake maker is independent and they're offering something different. I've based mine on the brand I've built up, my experience, the time it's taken, and of course ingredients. So my wedding cakes start from £500. So basically, if you want a wedding cake from me, it's going to be minimum 500. That was something new that I introduced recently, mainly because if I was going for a lower price per portion, people were basically getting £200, £300 wedding cakes. To make a wedding cake is a lot of effort and a lot of time, especially spent with the client, which I absolutely love. And that's the beauty of the wedding industry, that you get to know the client so well. But to only do the same amount of effort for a £200 cake wasn't worth it. So I put that minimum spend. Again, up to you if you want to do that. So I have 3 price points for my portion guide. And I always say starting from, because my cakes are always completely bespoke. So for example, someone wants a naked cake and the next person wants the same cake but with gold drips, which is obviously more work, so you charge a little more. But my price points are £6 a portion, £7 a portion, and £8 a portion. And I differentiate it depending on the decoration. So the £6 a portion is probably something like this, where it's firstly the naked effect, only with a few flowers or some fresh fruit. Very simple, and time-wise obviously doesn't take as long as my crazier cakes. The £8 a portion, so the top end, is my full crazy, all handmade decorations, drips and everything. And then the £7 a portion is somewhere in between. Now they could be naked cakes or just little clusters of decorations. Again, everything is on my website. So if, going back to your first inquiry, you can always just direct them to a website if everything's on there. But it is always good to just speak to them in person. So let's talk about portions. Now, if you Google cake portion guides, you do get really different results. I think this is mainly because cakes nowadays are taller. So my cakes have 4 layers of cake in, which means that each tier is roughly 4 to 5 inches tall. I think that's a newer trend, especially in the cake and wedding cake industry. So I've actually figured out my perfect portions, and I have drawn diagrams to show you, ranging from 10 to 4 inches. So just to put it into perspective, this cake is 4 inches, 6 inches, and 8 inches, and then this is a 10-inch, so imagine that's underneath. So firstly, I like to show how the cake is cut, which is usually a grid. You're most likely not going to cut a cake if you're supplying the wedding cake. It's usually the caterer's job or someone at the venue, and this is how they usually cut it. So each finger slice is kind of like a long cube or rectangle rather than a cake wedge. They can be cake wedges, but this is also the most simple way how to explain the portion guide. So for the 4-inch, it feeds 10 portions. With my grid that I've drawn, it actually shows a little more than 10, but some of them are small corners. So average, 10 portions. A 4-inch is also 10 centimeters. So I'll try to remember to convert them each time. 6-inch, which is 15 centimeters, I say feeds 20 portions. So for example, a 2-tier cake of 6 and 4 inches, just the top two, is 30 people at a wedding, which I actually have done in the past for smaller wedding ceremonies. The next size is the 8-inch, which is 20 centimeters, and this feeds 40 portions. So the 8, 6, and 4 inches, which is the same size as this cake here, feeds 70. Funnily enough, this is my most popular size. Now it sounds small, but I think it's a really nice size for 70 people, or if there's 80 at a wedding, people tend to just slightly downsize. But this is a really nice small cake, but it still has kind of substance and stands out. So yeah, this is my most popular size. Who knew? And then I have the 10 inches, which is 25 centimeters, and that feeds 60 people. So this size with the 10-inch underneath is 130 portions. 3 tiers of 10-inch, 8-inch, and 6-inch without this top tier is 120 portions. Another popular size. So the next size up, which I haven't drawn out and my tin is somewhere in storage, is the 12 inches, and that feeds 80 people. So you can get a lot of cake out of these tiers. So imagine a 5-tier cake with this and then a larger one, that's 210 people. That is portion sizes covered. I will leave all the details in the comments below, and I'll also upload these drawings to my Instagram at Georgia's Cakes, so you can go and check that out and use that as reference. Again, I have tall tiers, so this is my portion guide for a tall tiered cake. Back to the consultation and the tasting. So you've given the tasting, the clients are happy, they want to go ahead. How do they secure the order? I personally take 50% of the final total of the cake as a deposit. Some people take less, some people take more. It's a bit unfair to ask for the full amount. It can be a lot of money. So 50% just shows that they are eager to go ahead, and you're guaranteed the money. And then you can figure out your own cancellation policy. I think for wedding cakes, I have about a month's notice, because that's when I've already ordered flowers and made sure that I've got all the ingredients prepped for those coming weeks. And also, remember, you may have said no to other orders. So if someone cancels with really short notice, you may have missed out on an order that you could have been getting paid for. So that's a really important note. So finalizing the price of the cake, you've got the portions, so you've got the actual price of the cake, and then there are extra things like delivery. Remember, delivery takes up your time, so you have to charge accordingly. It takes me about half an hour to get into central London, and so I charge a flat rate of £50 to £75, depending on where in London. You have to be aware that the client is obviously spending a lot on your cake, so you can't charge the same for delivery, unless it's a couple of hours away. If you drive and you're driving the cake and it's a 2-hour drive, you can't just say, oh, it's £50, you know, £25 an hour for driving is great, but actually that's 2 hours there. You need about an hour setting up, and then it's 2 hours back. And then by the time you've loaded the car and unloaded the car, you've taken about 6 hours out of your day. So when people fall off the chair when you say the price of delivery, you can explain why, because it's mainly about the time taken plus the petrol costs. And then the last bit on the pricing, once you've obviously included the tasting within that, so that's deducted, is a cake stand. I always ask if the venue that the wedding is being held in has a cake stand, because it's just a lot easier if it's the venue's cake stand and you've delivered the cake and it's there and you don't need to worry about getting it back. If they don't have a cake stand and you want to give the client one to borrow, I would recommend taking a deposit. I charge £50, which I then refund the client once I get the cake stand back. I learned through mistakes. I didn't take a deposit and the cake stand was sent back to me, and it was one of those really nice expensive Mossa glass ones, and it broke. So not only did I not get a deposit, I had to, well, I didn't actually buy another one because I learned my lesson, but it was about £100. Just gone. Again, you learn. So yeah, so get a deposit for your cake stand, and then it's usually their responsibility to get it back to you. So the cake logs, or like a nice white china one, just be sure and explain to the client that they're very delicate and they should be returned to you in one piece. Quickly about transporting the cake. I don't usually travel with more than 4 tiers stacked. If it's more than 4 tiers, I separate the tiers as much as possible. Otherwise, it's just really difficult and also really heavy. Cakes are heavy, so you don't want to be carrying a 5-tier cake around. I would ask your client if there's a point of contact at the venue. You're not going to get hold of the bride and groom on the day, I can assure you now. So it's always good to have a contact number of someone who's at the venue, maybe the events planner, or if it's a hotel, someone working there. And you also want to know exactly where you're going, because when you turn up with the cake, you don't want to be holding a cake and running around the hotel like a headless chicken. Make sure you bring spare equipment, spare buttercream, and spare decorations with you. If you make Swiss meringue like I do, and it doesn't crust and it's very soft and delicious, but a bit of a pain, there are chances that things will get smudged and ruined. So I always bring a palette knife. I also have a cake lifter to lift the cake off the traveling board onto the cake stand, and little bits of buttercream and scrapers. Now, I usually decorate my cakes before I transport them, apart from the flowers. If you are using fresh, edible flowers, they need to be put on as last minute as possible. Which reminds me, I didn't mention about delivering and timing. Going back to your tasting and when you're talking to your clients, ask when they're cutting the cake and what room it's going to be in, and when is the latest you can set up. I say latest because you never know what the weather's doing, especially in England. We can have a heat wave in November for all I know. So I would always set the cake up as late as possible so it's not standing out so long. So for example, if they're having dinner in one room and then they're coming through to the dancing room where the cake is going to be at 8 o'clock, try and set up at least an hour before. So I would usually get there 6:30. And give yourself an hour to set up. It usually takes less time, but you just want to be safe. The only decorations that need to be added on is the edible flowers, like I was saying, and that is usually the only decoration I do at the venue, and maybe touches of gold leaf and edible glitter, and you just want to make it look amazing, because how you leave it is how the bride and groom is going to see it, and you just want them to look at your cake and go, wow. If you are starting out, it's very tempting to leave business cards by the cake. I wouldn't recommend doing this. I think it looks a bit tacky and a bit desperate, but what you can do is speak to the event organizer and give her some business cards and just kind of say, hi, I'm just starting out, it was lovely to meet you, can I leave some cards with you? You may even think, I don't even have business cards, isn't everything on Instagram? Unfortunately, at weddings, when everyone's had a bit too much to drink and the cake comes out, they will take photos, but they don't then think going, can anyone tell me who made this cake because I need to tag them? It's a very in the moment thing and you may miss the tag, etc. Look, at the end of the day, if someone wants to know who made that cake, they'll ask the bride and groom and they will tell them. So I think if someone really does want your cake, you'll get the job, don't worry. So you leave, keeping your fingers crossed, hoping that no one's knocking into the cake. You explain to the event organizer and ask who's cutting it and just double check that they know that there's straws and dowels in there, just so that no one gets a fright. And then you leave. And then you wait for that email. And that email may not come, which is usually a good sign. They say no news is good news. Or you get pleasantly delighted when the email comes through a few days later of your clients praising you, saying how amazing the cake was and that, oh my God, everyone loved it, it all went, etc. Again, fingers crossed they say that. And then you can relax and you can breathe again and you can make your next cake and start all over again. So, I know I've been talking a lot and this hasn't been the most visually exciting video, but I hope you found this helpful and answered a lot of your questions. Once again, this is how I do my wedding cakes. You may disagree with some of the points I've made, but this is literally everything I do. I'm being really honest with you, and I hope that it's helped you and gained you confidence, because the wedding industry can be quite daunting. I think it's got like this label on, especially when they say like luxury brands, luxury this, luxury that. It's not scary if you do it properly, and if you get the odd bridezilla, work with them. You're making their cake. The cake's the fun bit. If you're the event organizer, that's something else, but no, the cake always brings smiles, and that's why I love making them. So again, I hope you found this really helpful. If you have any other suggestions of videos, then please write in the comments below, and until next time, I will see you very soon.